Okay, so thanks everyone for joining. So we're pretty much at the end or close to the end of November already. So what we're sort of thinking here is that we probably won't hold, like, unless somebody's got a burning topic that they really need to have covered in December, we'll probably keep this as the last session for the year, as opposed to having another one in a couple of weeks' time. As you know, some of you probably have got things like school holidays and work, Christmas parties, etc., to deal with. So unless someone's got a major objection, like if you're planning on traveling to Sydney just to attend in person, don't do that in December, or at least let us know and we can probably meet at a pub for lunch somewhere instead.
Exactly.
Okay, so just quickly here, I'm Mark O'Shea, and it's Steve. I've got Stephen sitting here. Can they actually see? Yeah, they can. I've got Stephen sitting here on my right, and yeah, we're not going to see Ben or your own today. Ben's sleepy. Ben needs to have a cat nap.
Yeah.
And in the Netherlands, it's voting day. So go democracy, I think, is the best I've got for that.
I hope there's democracy.
Sausages. Yeah, he did. Yeah, he didn't. Yeah, he didn't come back to me with a response to that. I had to do a search to see what was like a popular.
No, you know what it's going to be?
Sausage.
It's going to be democracy stroopwafels.
The stroopwafels he brought out with him, they did not last very long.
No, they never last.
Like, I think a possum snuck into the house and ate them in the middle of the night.
Definitely a possum.
But not a cat.
No,
it was a possum.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a pretty straightforward agenda today, even though we'll be jumping around between quite a few different topics. The agenda is mostly pretty straightforward. It's what were some of the big announcements that relate to stuff that we focus on at Ignite. Now, hopefully somebody hasn't seen the Ignite announcements thing and has come along to hear about completely random Ignite announcements that have got nothing to do with things we normally cover.
Because Ignite?
It was. Oh. Yeah, that was last week.
Oh, it was, wasn't it?
Yeah. So we'll get into that shortly. So probably just a quick thing in here. So Jose, just for you, we are going to talk about Copilot at some point. Okay, so we'll play a drinking game. Every time somebody says Copilot or types Copilot into the chat, everyone has to take a shot. I think if you did that during any of the keynotes, you would not have stayed awake for the entire keynote. Okay, so if there's anyone new who's joining us for the first time, please feel free to unmute to introduce yourself. Alternatively, if you want to just do a quick introduction via chat. Now, I actually have to give a quick apology to Jose. I did quickly drop in to see your room up in Brisbane, however many weeks ago that was, but then I decided I really wanted to get out to the airport so I could try to get onto an earlier flight. So apologies for not coming in and hanging around and asking stupid questions. Okay, and we've got Clock joining us.
That's right, Mark. I know you'll make the next one.
Yeah. So do you have dates for any upcoming ones?
Now we're just getting into planning, but we're thinking about adding Canberra next year as well. So I'll as soon as I have the dates, I'll tell you guys, and we can talk about probably next month or the month after.
So in preparation, I've actually kept the Workplace Ninja slide in the deck. I've just got it hidden so that as soon as you announce a new date, I can just make a couple of updates, unhide the slide, and we'll be able to promote it again for you.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's continue on. And we have one upcoming event. So I did some slide editing here to make sure that it was universal.
Yeah.
See, I'm thinking smart here.
Yeah.
It's only taken however many years.
3, 4 years.
And really just one coming up next week. So we've got Microsoft Technical Takeoff. Now I've got all the links, so I'll just drop the links into chat as we talk rather than trying to jump out and switching between PowerPoint and the other pieces. But probably just the important things to know here is that there are some really good topics there. The 11:30 a.m. finish is 6:30 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time. What is it? AEDT.
Sydney.
So if you're someone who wakes up early, you've probably got time to have a look at a session with your morning coffee. But for any of you who would rather sleep in, it's not going to be applicable. But they're all being recorded. And as with any of these, even if it's something where you don't have the motivation to actually sit through and watch the recording, like I always recommend at least going through the comments in the feedback section, because there's always some good little nuggets that you'll see in there, whether it's someone thinking about it quite differently to how you think about it. So they may say something that you think is absolutely stupid, and but it could just be that they've got completely different requirements for something versus you. So I'm sure there'll be some Copilot summaries that go out. Someone will download the closed captioning once that's generated, and they'll run it through something, and it will then spit out a summary for us.
I'm sure you could just get Copilot to create meeting minutes from the session.
Yeah. And then, so in terms of the topics, it's pretty, very Windows and Intune focused, as well as Win365 and AVD. As much as I think sometimes, at least for me anyway, and I'll throw Steve under the bus here as well. Do you try to separate out Windows 365 conversations as different things to AVD conversations?
I'll make it really easy. I just don't have the conversations
about either of them.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, it's
actually no. I have the conversation about Windows 365. AVD for me,
that's an Azure infrastructure conversation, and that's not the world you live in.
You need to have an Azure subscription for.
Okay, so we've now found the line, except your Logic Apps stuff.
Yeah, I'm starting to go back in there.
You're violating your own rules there.
Yep.
Yeah, so there's plenty of sessions. If you've already had a quick look at it, so just
what I will add to this around technical takeoff is this is an engineering-led engagement, so you're going to get a lot more technical engagement compared to what you may have seen at Ignite. So,
because I think I didn't pay, even though I went through the Ignite schedule, maybe I'm just remembering things in a different way to how they really were. But it seems like there's a lot fewer sessions and a lot fewer concurrent tracks running or I guess the venue itself would basically force that. If you're in Orlando Convention Center, you can go kind of nuts.
You'd be surprised how big Seattle Summit Center is, because this is the new conference center, not the old conference center.
Yeah. So some of the things where, if somebody wanted to follow a very specific technology as opposed to a technology track at Ignite, in years gone by, that's something that you could probably do for most of the sessions. Whereas now what you'll find is that it's, even if they, obviously they can't have unlimited rooms, but just the sheer scope of all the different things that need to be included in Ignite. So every year there's probably 20 to 30% more topics that need to be covered with pretty much the same number of sessions on offer. So the likelihood of you being able to stick to a track is pretty good. But if someone goes, and I'm just sort of looking at the 10 a.m. Tuesday slot. The 10 a.m. Tuesday slot for Tech Takeoff is what's new in Active Directory. I don't think that would get a full session at Ignite. It would be a slide in the what's new in Windows Server session.
That would mean there was a what's new in Windows Server session.
No, there was.
Oh, wow.
There was.
Wow.
And that was something that I was going to put in the slide, but I forgot about it. But this has reminded me of it. So just a quick random note here. One of the things that's changed I don't know technically it's probably not Windows Server that's changed, but for the current two versions of server. So I think it's like Server 20 in 2022 or something. They're now going to be supporting Microsoft 365 apps on them, as opposed to you having to use Office perpetual licenses on them, which for Steve doesn't matter. But going back to the AVD stuff, that's something that could be useful for those conversations. That's all I know about what's changed with Windows Server.
All I heard was you were talking about licensing.
Oh, good. And somebody that I was hoping would appear has just turned up. So Aresh, I have created a slide for Aresh that he hasn't seen yet. But I am pretty confident that you'll know what's on it. So it won't be any real surprises. Actually, that should be something we do each month. We should create a slide for someone and then tell them on the day that they have to deliver it, just to keep them on their toes.
Okay.
Now,
no worries. I think that's a good idea.
Okay, so before we get into the Ignite announcements, I spent a lot of time putting this next slide together. So I went to the Ignite Book of Secrets, and I did a search for how many times the word Copilot appeared. Come on, that's a good slide.
Yes.
It took a long time for me to put that one together. Now, probably just the things that I want to say here quickly on Copilot is, yes, we will be talking about some Copilot as we go through this. But I think it's going to be one of those things that I think for quite a while, there'll be people, and you might even be in this situation yourself until you have a conversation about it, where people are going, oh, there's too many different Copilots. How am I expected to know what each of them are? And you don't need to know what each of them are. You just need to know the ones that are relevant for your, for whatever tasks, whatever roles you're focused on. So I'm sure, like if we did a list of here are the different Copilots that are becoming available over the next 6 months, we could probably drop a bunch of fake ones in and no one would even call them out, because if we made the names legitimate enough, it would look pretty good. But in this case, it's it's obviously it's a big thing. In terms of what we'll talk about in here, it's really the probably at a top level, it's going to be the security Copilot integration with some of the different portals. So for us, that's probably the big focus here. Like, we're not going to be talking about Copilot for Microsoft 365 or things along those lines. I'm sure we can cover some of that stuff at some point in the future. So let's continue on. Now, the first thing that I just wanted to bring up in here is we got some announcements around the three, not missing in action, but the three announced but currently unavailable pieces of the Intune suite. So in the blog posts, and Stephen was surprised when I told him this, they're actually saying that rolling out. Actually, I think the blog posts say rolling out from February 2024. So that could mean any time. That's like I could. Yeah. Okay, so we'll talk about the top three in a bit more detail. But I guess with the pricing pieces that I put in here underneath that, I just put these in here because one of the things that I was really struggling with when this was first announced was that if three of those components weren't available, then that's basically half the value of the suite that wasn't available when it was originally released. Whereas now that it's there, it makes it a lot easier for someone who was looking at it and kind of sitting on the fence about whether they should go for a couple of the individual components or whether they could go for a suite. Now, the thing that it's not just this, but it's some of the other add-ons, etc., that are becoming available now that it hasn't convinced me of this yet, but I think I have to start changing my mindset a little bit. Whereas it's not that I've been like completely opposed to people buying the standalone add-ons as opposed to buying suites of things, but I think now it's getting harder to justify adding an entire suite each time Microsoft releases a new suite that incorporates certain capabilities that you actually want. Now, part of me is just like, just spend the money and leverage it all. But as we start looking at some of these things, some of the stuff is going to be incredibly useful for a lot of organizations. Some of it is going to be less useful for some organizations, especially if they've already got similar or competing things deployed already, and they've got licenses that they've paid for, the functionality is still there. So here, I think at least now the value prop in terms of getting the suite versus buying a couple of components, it's starting to make more sense there as long as people are actually, using those capabilities. Now, the other one that, I sort of spoke to Steve about briefly before we kicked the session off was I kind of just had to do like a mental clarity thing with Steve about the final bullet point, the firmware over the air update, because it's such a specific thing. And the fact that it's not even mentioned on the main Microsoft.com information page, you actually have to go over to Microsoft Learn to see this thing listed. Normally they'd be calling out what's included in something. And so that one, I was thinking, oh, what is it? And then when I looked at it, it was like, oh, well, I don't use that third-party software and I don't use LG Android devices. Therefore, this is not something that's applicable for me. But if you're getting it as part of, Intune Suite, then, that's fine. Now, if we then jump in and go through a few of these things, we won't go into too much detail on these because I think there's still a lot of unanswered questions, and I think we'll start seeing more answers over the next few months. But with the enterprise app management, then in this case, and anyone who wants to jump in here, please do so. But this is something that I'm trying to think of a good way to summarize it without sounding like I'm downplaying what it does. But in terms of helping you keep your apps up to date, etc., giving you more of a curated app experience versus just getting everything from Winget and hoping from the best. So for orgs that want to go down that path, then this is something that's is going to be useful for them. But again, what I think a challenge here is going to be, and Ben's not here, but I'm wearing a Ben t-shirt, so I am Big Ben today. I got to use that joke twice, and Steve's laughed twice. When you've got things like Patch My PC, etc., out there, which have got good mind share, good market share, etc., it can make this a bit of a tougher conversation. But the reality is as much as some of the bubble, I'm sure that all of us live in some type of technology bubble where we think that everyone knows about certain things and is using certain things. So if you think that everyone is using Intune, or if you think that everyone is aware of Patch My PC, in the circles you are in, or in the echo chambers you exist in, that could well be true. But in terms of broader awareness, it's something that once you start getting out of the device management space, which is a pretty small percentage of the IT market in general, things that we think everyone knows are not things that people know. So there'll be people who, for whatever reason, have never looked at Patch My PC or other solutions that will look at this and, it's going to meet, they'll look at it and they'll go, that meets my requirements. Do I buy it standalone? Do I buy it as part of the suite? But again, then those people who've got things like Patch My PC, etc., and maybe there are other things out there that we can put into the same category. Like I'm sure we'll see people come out with tables comparing this versus that. And what my take on this is that if there are features that you need in other solutions, you don't really have a choice. You're going to use those other solutions. But if it's somebody who doesn't really know what they need, and maybe they're already licensed for Intune Suite, then this would be, I'd say this would actually be probably a better starting point for them. And then if they do realize that there are things in here or think there are things missing that they need, being able to then use that as their way to figure out what we actually need moving forward, rather than making a big commitment to something else first. So when we do sessions on this in the future, we'll probably not be able to have Ben on the call. And Ben would probably, actually, I shouldn't say that. Ben would probably prefer not to be, is probably a better way to put it. And then that way it means that there's, less of a conflict overall with that. So this is something that I'm looking forward to. Hopefully my Intune suite licenses, I've got to check to see when they expire. I hope they're still alive by then.
Looks like Jose's got his hand up.
Okay, so yeah, Jose.
So for me as an integrator, and I participate on the Jason Sandy's session in Switzerland, I see Advanced App Catalog as a great thing because a lot of people are asking a bunch of questions. How do you compare with Patch My PC and all that kind of stuff? And I said, look, all we do, it's bounded to what a Win32 apps can do, which is what everyone kind of have the same problem. But like that thing, I think it pushes Microsoft to add more features to the Win32 apps, and that's good for everyone. So
yeah,
my take is that thing is a great thing that Microsoft is getting into the play as well, because they're going to be forcing the Win32 app or the IME team to support. Already there have been some talks on that session about pre and post scripts and things like that built in, which would make everyone's lives easier. So I love that personally.
Yeah, and probably one more thing that I should have mentioned here is there are also going to be organizations that want to limit the number of vendors that they're acquiring licenses from. So if they can get more things from a particular vendor, as opposed to having, purchase agreements with multiple vendors, there are definitely some customers who prefer to go down that path, just in terms of basically it keeps their finance team happier. Now let me just grab.
Yeah, and then sorry, Mark, and as you said, I think on the I think I cut over someone. Just go ahead.
I think Avresh wants to say something.
Yeah,
Sorry, Mark.
I've played around with Patch My PC and this. Steve, a question particularly for you. Is this just for Winget, or this is beyond Winget based applications and it can go to Win32 applications also?
I've not touched it, to be completely transparent.
Can I say?
Do you know?
Yeah. So this thing is a curated catalog, but Microsoft is not using Winget at all. When you acquire an app via the store, it will package as Win32 app and it will deploy to your tenant, the same as other things. So things like DO and all these things, they work seamlessly because it's a Win32 app. It's not a Winget app.
Okay.
And it's not the same store. It's a separate store. The Microsoft will be providing a list, which I heard on the number 5,000 at some point. But again, I'm not sure when that thing will come to that number of apps.
Yeah, so that brings me to the next question, which probably might be a Ben question. How many apps would that catalog have versus a Patch My PC kind of a solution, which has been around? And I assume their catalog, I've seen their catalog to be very extensive.
You could probably, so this is using logic and no facts are involved in anything I'm about to say. But if you think about the amount of time, like the length of time that Patch My PC have been doing this, their starting point in terms of the number of apps that they are going to support is going to be, way bigger than potentially Microsoft ever even attempts. And the reason for that is some of the things that they may have in there may just be in there for legacy reasons. So they're not really things that, someone is actively looking for a way to do that anymore. It was that Patch My PC had to figure out how to do that going back, how many years have they been around now? So yeah, so they've got a pretty decent, let's call it, back catalogue of particular versions of apps, older apps, etc. That on the Microsoft side, it's going to have to be the right sized customer or the right type of customer for Microsoft to, I guess, prioritize some of those things that that Patch My PC have already done. So I'd say their Patch My PC, their catalog would, in terms of the just the reach it has, I'd say it's going to be multiples, many, many multiples of what Microsoft is going to initially provide, and probably would remain that way for a while. But again, that's just, making a lot of assumptions about things in there.
I asked that question again. If I might interrupt again, I asked the same question, Arash, to Jason, and I said, look, what is going to be required for you to add a new app? Because my company, we package apps for schools, which in Australia might be a big thing, but like it's it's not commercial, like to a level, Intune level. And I say, if someone wants to go to you and require that app, and they say, yeah, we do not know how that's going to work. It's going to be a voting system or something similar for you to add something on back catalog. But as Mark said, I don't see Microsoft going there and playing the automated packaging game for the really tiny small apps, or like apps that are not widely used across the shelf. But I may be wrong. Again, that's just my opinion.
Yeah, makes sense.
Now, the other thing, I'll take a look at for this a little bit later as we go through the session, but there was, so not directly related to this, but more on the Winget side. I think it was Microsoft Developer YouTube channel in the last couple of days published a new video on basically Winget frequently asked questions. And there were things in there about, how they make sure that it's, safe apps, et cetera, that are getting pushed in there. So not directly this, but in terms of just the Winget side of things, could be worth having a look at. So I'll dig that up and post the link into chat as we go through. Okay, now for Intune Advanced Analytics. So probably, this is getting to the point now where, being able to get, closer to real-time data from devices, as opposed to waiting for everything to get stored in some kind of, back-end analytics solution that we can then start querying. So that basically the second bullet point, the near real-time capabilities being added in, but then just the ongoing recommendations it's going to be making. And a lot of this is going to be, AI driven. They're not automatically saying it's AI, therefore we'll call it Copilot. Like, I'm sure we'll see examples of things that are probably, machine learning more than AI, where but Copilot will get slapped onto it. So I'll go out on a limb and say, stay tuned for this to be renamed Copilot. No, I am joking. That is not something that there's been any indication of. So in here, this is always like one of the challenges that we've got with Intune is just in terms of the ability to query it, the reporting capabilities. So anything that's pushing that in the right direction, for me, that's a big win. And in this case, if it's something that's going through, and here they're talking about, it being more proactive, et cetera, instead of just, telling you what you've got, it making recommendations and, as to what you should be doing. For a lot of orgs, that's something that probably is going to be a useful addition in there. Anything from you, Steve, on advanced analytics? Okay, now the one that I think we can probably talk about for a while is the cloud PKI.
Sorry, Mark, can I ask one question?
Yeah.
I tried to discuss a couple of days ago when they announced the query stuff. Do any of you guys know how does that work? If there is like a live query that is going to be tried to send to the device via WPN or something for the device to get that stuff, or it's going to be coming, if the device offline is coming from a pre-queried something, I don't know.
Yeah. So I don't think they've really given the details on that yet, but if they're saying near real time, so the initial thought that I was having around this is it kind of tapping into something similar to live response that we've got over on the Defender for Endpoint side. So obviously the capabilities to do this kind of thing are already in Defender for Endpoint, where, once we're going in, we can use it to collect log information, stats, et cetera, pretty easily on, clients. So even if it's not using the same technology, my guess is that it would be a fairly similar approach in terms of what it's doing. But it's going to be like, I'd work on the assumption the client it's not something where the client would be listening. It's something where the client would be listening, but not locally. The client would have to be, getting this request from a service endpoint somewhere, because we can't reach out to the client. And just, first of all, it's a bad idea to reach out to the client for a lot of reasons. So my guess here, it wouldn't surprise me if we find out that something related to live response is being leveraged here. But once again, just speculation. I'm getting a bit of feedback here that I can't share. Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Pretty much like the proactive remediation on demand, right? Something on the kind of the sorts.
Yeah. So there are ways of getting that data. Yeah. Okay. So Cloud PKI. Now this will be one that is probably going to be the most polarizing, in my opinion, anyway. It's because first of all, you'll have some people or some orgs that just look at it and go, "We've moved our org."
Just quickly,
Yeah.
Aresh, your hand's still up. Are you still wanting any questions?
Yes, absolutely. I just wanted to highlight on the previous slide something which I saw even cooler, is that one does not have to learn the Custo language for these queries, because what they've done, and I probably would paste that screenshot in the channel as well, that there is a Copilot for that. So you could technically don't have to learn the language to probe the machine. You could ask the Copilot for the query and then run the query directly, and gives you a lot of information. So that's what I wanted to add on that part. So nobody has to learn another programming language.
I thought everyone knew that Custo was compulsory.
Yeah, KQL. It's like,
and don't worry, we're going to talk about KQL, or at least this KQL, because don't forget, Microsoft's got two different KQLs. But there's only one that we will talk about here, and it's the one that we generally use against log analytics or other related data stores, not the one that's in SharePoint. We pretend that one doesn't exist. Okay, so the Cloud PKI piece. So I said that I think this one is going to be one of the fairly polarizing, or probably the most polarizing, because first of all, you'll have a pretty decent percentage of organizations that might be looking at Intune or Intune Suite, who have probably tried or are in the process of moving away from PKI in general, if they can. So there'll be some organizations that are just trying to look for alternatives to anything that they've already got that's leveraging PKI. So what that means then is that, we've got a subset of the market or a subset of the Intune market that Cloud PKI is going to be targeting. But then within that subset of the market, if we start breaking that down further, you're going to have people who've invested a lot on their existing on-prem PKI infrastructure. And unless this does everything that on-prem PKI solution they've got can do, and we don't know you don't know what edge use cases people have got for PKI. We can make some assumptions and say, people are probably doing, Wi-Fi profiles, network, et cetera, but there's always going to be some random type of thing that somebody is using it for that's just completely out of scope for what the Intune team wants to use it for. So from there, this is something that there are going to be I'd say that this will be something where there are some very specific use cases where this is going to be a perfect solution. But I think we're also going to see a lot of feedback around this where people will want it to do things that are just basically outside of the scope of what the Intune team wants this to do. As to what the full details are, I think we'll start seeing more of this. Let me just drop in the link to the blog post on this, because even when you start looking at the feedback or in the comments section in there, there's already like a bit of that in there. Let me just find the URL and I'll drop it in. You can already start seeing some of those questions as you jump into comments. And yeah, you know, they're all fair questions and comments, etc., that are in there. Now, rather than switching out to the browser, you can follow along if you follow the link and scroll down. It was towards the bottom. I wanted to talk a little bit about one of the comments that was in here. Yeah, so it's the last one from somebody whose name I'm guessing is Angus, but spelled weirdly, or maybe it's not a weird spelling of Angus. Maybe I just think it's a weird spelling of Angus. But what I wanted to call out here is, and this is sort of coming back to what I mentioned earlier about, you know, the price of something that's included as part of a suite versus looking at the standalone price of something. Because if we take a look at the argument that Angus is making here around, you know, setting up PKI on-prem, managing it, you know, having it virtualized, no planning for, you know, new versions of whatever OS, etc., knowing that there's going to be ongoing maintenance. Yes, there are going to be costs involved in that. But if we take a look here and somebody's saying, okay, well, if this is, let's say we are, a user in the tens. So if it's 10 users or 50 users or something like that, it's a very different conversation to an organization that's got tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of users. Because if we then start going, well, hang on, if it's $3 times that number of users times 12 per year, that, you know, their numbers are going to get pretty big pretty quickly. But if it's somebody who's already looking at the Intune suite because they want other things, then at that point, I'm not saying that you're getting this for free at that point because you're getting it as part of the suite, but it's, you know, it's one of those things where, like, this is one of the reasons why I think this one is going to be tougher, is that if somebody's not interested in going down the full suite path, you know, a large org who I'm guessing is probably going to be more likely to keep PKI around versus a small org are the ones who are going to see, you know, the price of this is going to ramp up very, very quickly for them. Now, is this any different to any other on-prem service that may have been included in Windows Server or things like that, that we paid a perpetual fee for? So let's use the example of group policy for management. So is this any different to a group policy conversation? It's probably not that different, the way that people will sort of look at the pricing and break down the cost comparisons. But for me, this kind of highlights if somebody is buying the individual components as opposed to a suite. It does change how we have to look at the pricing of these things. So I've got that full screen on my machine, so I just need to jump back over to comments in here. So so I think any of the sessions, actually, have they promoted sessions at, I'm sure there must be sessions on PKI at Tech Takeoff.
I believe so.
Yeah, they'd have to be. I think they would, if this is something that you are interested in, like, hopefully, I'm guessing there are sessions on it. And once again, even if you can't make it to the session, at least look at the comments, and just skip to the appropriate parts of the recording to see. But like, this is the one where, like, my gut feeling here is that everyone, or the people who are going to make the most noise here, will be people with what we would probably consider edge case scenarios. But to them, it's not an edge case scenario. To them, it's the thing that's most important because it's what their on-prem solution does. Whereas the Intune team might just look at that and say, these just aren't scenarios that we're really planning on. But that might be the feedback they need to incorporate those capabilities.
Yeah, so there's a session on coming to the Microsoft Intune Suite, Microsoft Cloud PKI, which is on Pacific time, 9 a.m. Wednesday, November the 29th.
Okay, so set your alarms.
So about 4 a.m.
Okay. Now, the next slide, I'm going to hand over to Steve because it's his favorite thing. And I'm not joking this time.
What am I talking about?
It's something you volunteered to talk about.
Ah, yes. That's fine.
And I have a loaded question for you as we go through this, Steve. So please do your thing.
Yes, Mark, I will. So what we announced at Ignite is that frontline workers for the F3 and F5 SKU will be eligible for Windows Autopatch. The other thing that we announced, and it's still, we haven't got a time on when it's going to be completed, but you're going to see a lot of the conversation around Autopatch and Windows Update for Business consolidating. So it will be a more simplified story and narrative.
Just putting a little asterisk next to that. That is what I'll be asking you about. Please continue.
One of the really cool features that we've added, I believe it's landed, it's definitely in the portal, is if you have group policy conflicting with your update for business policies, we will now tell you the registry keys that are causing that conflict. But we won't actually auto remediate it, and that's very important because you need to go stop setting those configurations because of this thing called race condition. So it's all about show back to say, hey, you need to go and fix this, and we're trying to give you as much information as possible to say this is where you're running into issues. We're adding more controls around drivers and firmware, which is pretty awesome. And the last one, which is cool, is you'll be able to pull in your existing Windows Update for Business policies that are published in Microsoft Intune into Windows Autopatch groups. So what's your question?
Okay, so I'm pasting some text from the announcement into chat for you, but I'll give you the summary. But there's already a comment in chat in the feedback section about it, but I thought it was worth calling out here. So basically they're saying that the wording is
this off the tech community blog?
Yes. Yeah. So the wording here, and I've got a feeling the wording is probably the issue here, and
yes,
that it may not be official wording.
It's
because they're saying that there'll be Windows Update for Business and Autopatch will be combined into a single service for enterprise customers, blah, 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 blah. Now, the tricky piece here is, first of all, combining them and then saying enterprise customers. So
TBD.
So you know where I'm going with this?
Yep.
As to
TBD.
So there are problems with this paragraph in terms of licensing.
I understand exactly what you're saying, and TBD.
Okay.
But it is on the radar. It is being investigated, but again, it's very early days on where.
So we are talking BP. Okay. So so basically the thing that's called out in comments is because Autopatch is normally an M365 E3 or E5 type capability.
It's part of the Windows E3.
Oh yeah, so it's part of your Windows Enterprise license, which Business Premium users do not have.
They do with National.
They have a wonderful legal fulfillment product called Windows Business. And let's leave the conversation there. So this is something that, but to be fair though, like Business Premium ends up getting some additional inclusions that the core products that it incorporates do not qualify for. So even like over on the, just even with the Microsoft 365 apps, Microsoft 365 apps for business, didn't initially support AIP labeling, but as soon as it saw you had a Business Premium license, it said, oh, we'll turn that feature on for you. So Business Premium, as per usual, is great in terms of what's included for the price, but problematic in terms of figuring out, is it there? Is it going to be enabled? If it is it enabled accidentally or was it deliberate? And having to find documentation to support whatever case you think it is there. So on that front, I just sort of wanted to mention that one because it's something that's mentioned in the comments. And I think, is it David? Someone else called that. It's Alex Rock calls it out in that one. And that's actually a good question because sometimes it is tough to figure out what business. Yeah, and I can see some love hearts for Jose, and I know it's not Valentine's Day yet. So I'm guessing, yeah, because we're talking about business premium, that's always good to get clarity.
My main question for the team was, am I going on a Windows Autopatch blade to configure something, given that I do not have a license for Autopatch? Like when you're pulling all together, it makes like the differentiation means that we go to our customer and say, you have business premium, you can use this and this in this future. Autopilot you cannot even see because it's not really in a license. But now with them converging, my guess is patching, any kind of patching solution is going to come under an Autopilot blade in Intune, and that might be confusing because people on business premium, unless those things is yet to be seen, are converged into the same license. People with business premium would need to go on Autopilot, but they cannot see all the features that Autopilot provides because a few of them are linked to E3 only. But I think that there will be an announcement at some point soon about that. I'm hoping at least, because they cannot keep going long without knowing what's going to be done with.
Yeah, and even there, it's like some of the things that have gotten better for business premium over the last year or so. Even things where, like things like the security and compliance add-ons that previously required E3 as your base. Now you can use business premium as your base there. So it's not that they ignore that business premium market. It's just that the business premium team have to fight really hard to get additional stuff included when those teams are trying to sort of reclaim their investment and justify their existence without having a cheaper product come in and say, can you include this in here for free? So I understand both points of view with that one. Okay. So now jumping in here, this is just really a quick overview slide of, we're not going to go through all of these. We'll just sort of talk about a couple of them, but in terms of some of the things that are probably relevant to things that we focus on, where Security Pilot is going to be, what you'll see as like the terminology that you'll keep seeing is like Security Copilot embedded in or embedded with. So basically dropping Copilot in basically as a pane in your browser into Intune, Purview, etc. in these cases. So we've got Defender XDR mentioned there. We'll talk about what that actually is shortly, because that's another thing where I think there's going to be some potential for confusion. Now, I'm guessing there are probably, even already there might be some co-pilots that I've missed that are probably relevant to this conversation, but I think these are probably the main ones. So let's at least jump in and take a look at Copilot and Intune in this case. So this is tying into, I think, one of the things that Aresh was talking about, where when we're using Copilot, it's popping up and it's going to be giving context-sensitive information to us. So in this case, it's going through and the wording that they're using here is it's providing it in. So we can use it to provide what-if analysis. If there's custom queries that need to be written, etc., we can get it to do those things for us. So this is something that is so I think probably just the thing here, and this is probably just more of the general security Copilot conversation that I want to have, as opposed to just a general Copilot conversation, is like this is one of those things where it's like people who are getting started are going to get certain things out of Copilot in terms of it, recommending best practices, pushing them in the right direction, etc. But then we're not saying that people who are more advanced won't be able to use Copilot. They'll just have more complicated scenarios where Copilot is going to save them hours of tearing their hair out trying to figure out how to achieve something. Or potentially when you're stepping out of your comfort zone in Intune into an area that maybe you don't deal with normally, instead of going from I'm an expert at app deployment to I know nothing about app configuration profiles, having something that basically gets you from a zero knowledge starting point to some kind of core skill level, even if you're just following the recommendations, you've got to have a degree of trust in it. For some organizations, I'm sure they'll go through and still validate everything that's a recommendation before they start implementing it. That would probably make really good sense, because we've never seen scenarios where AI or machine learning start giving bad recommendations or saying things that just just aren't true. So it would still be a situation where you'd still be verifying, but at least you've got something to start with. Maybe you need to make a few changes, etc., in there as you go through. And in this case, one of the examples in here is showing the what if analysis. So it's going to highlight if the changes that you're going to make are going to have, what kind of impact it's going to have. So is it going to reduce security? Is it something that a security change you make that they think maybe this is something that's going to have a negative impact on end user productivity, for example, or if it's something that they think that making this change, could potentially cause performance issues on the device. So just something that's got that kind of collected knowledge for, basically to at least get us thinking about things that may not have been on our radar when we were doing our planning. I think this is going to do a good job of filling in some of the gaps and presenting things that, especially when we're doing something that's a little bit outside of scope of what we normally handle. I think some of the stuff that we'll see with Copilot is going to be incredibly useful in those cases. But if someone is just coming into Intune with no knowledge of Intune, no knowledge of mobile device management and things like that, I think you would still struggle even using Copilot, because you wouldn't know where to begin to start asking Copilot, what to do there. But at least, hopefully at least there, it's going to sort of say, here are the top 5 things you should start with at least. Now, this is I think it's still in private preview, but I think it's an open preview that you can request access to. Let me just check so I can see if I've got a URL for that somewhere. Oh, yeah, let me grab the link. So Fox normally pretty good at dropping links in quickly. So I beat him for a change. So in here, is that? Did I copy the right link? Let me just check.
I've pasted one as well.
Okay, yeah. So early access program. Yeah. So the pricing of these things, it's I think I'm not going to comment. I think it's really let's stay tuned and see what the options are as it becomes available. I'm not even going to. I don't even know what to speculate about this. Now, continuing on a theme, even though we're changing topics here, is Defender XDR. Now, this is effectively the Defender portal, but bringing in Security Copilot as an embedded option, but also integrating Sentinel into the portal as well. Now, those of you who know Sentinel can probably squint a bit and look just below the Contoso logo, and after you see the little home icon, you'll start seeing that there are things that, basically there's a list of, your hunting, etc., including, Sentinel is listed in there as well. Now, the thing that I've got to look and I've got to dig into this, and this is probably something that we'll cover in a lot more detail in a future session, is I'm curious about what the potential changes this approach makes in terms of when we're setting up things like our Defender connector for Microsoft 365 connector in Sentinel, and we've got things like incidents and alerts that will come in for free, but then we have to we pay ingestion fees on just regular activity for that kind of stuff. I'm curious here if we're still going to be able to get into just so in here where I think the third item down is hunting. So is the hunting option there going to be Sentinel hunting that we're doing, or if we do have Sentinel, or is it going to be taking us to our Defender view for KQL? So I'm not sure of that, and that's something that there is a few different things related to that I want to make sure of before I talk about it too much. But the other thing here as well that I think is probably just a good expectation to set here is there'll be people who maybe they're not familiar with the way that, Sentinel is deployed and basically it's part of an Azure subscription. Probably just to sort of be quite clear here is that Sentinel will still be something that you generally speaking would be, deploying, your resource groups, deploying log analytics workspace, etc., controlling it the way you want in Azure, applying RBAC, etc. And this is just one way to expose it. So it's not saying that Sentinel is now part of Defender. It's just that now we've got a centralized view where Defender can come into, where Sentinel can come into the Defender portal. So just be wary of that one. Be careful with the words that you use there, because I think it's going to be really easy for people to think that people will interpret this. So even the way that I've got Defender XDR combines M365 Defender, Sentinel, and Security Copilot, there'll be some people who look at that and go, Sentinel is included with the cost, with the pricing of M365 Defender. But no, Sentinel is Sentinel pricing. Things that cost money to ingest in Sentinel will cost you money to ingest in Sentinel. So once we get a bit of clarity on that, I think that's something we haven't covered, Sentinel and Defender stuff for a while. So this is probably a good opportunity to jump back into this once this comes into at least public preview. Then we can jump into that. Now, just one other thing that I wanted to cover off quickly before I hand over to Aresh for a slide, and this one sort of got my attention, and even though I think this happened just before Ignite, it did make its way into the Ignite announcement, and it's something that I've spoken to people about in the past where they've sort of asked questions about, well, when we're deploying WSL, if we're using Intune, is there any way for Intune to actually manage WSL? So people basically didn't want WSL being something that was outside of the control of the endpoint management team, which was kind of pretty much a fair comment. So here it's something that's in there, and I jumped into settings catalog to take that screenshot there for you. So it's there, it's live. So any of you who so this is probably not a representative audience. I'm guessing there's probably going to be a lot more of you versus users who've got WSL installed and are using it versus what the average population would be, unless you're talking to people who are doing dev work, etc. But how many of you are using WSL, even if you've just got it installed and you play around with it occasionally, as opposed to actually doing anything productive? So at least now we've got a way to go through and at least manage some of the capabilities there. Now it's let me just drop the link in so that you can have a look at it. Okay. So not a huge number of different settings in there, but it's basically for what it is, and really as a V1 approach, this is infinitely better than what was there in terms of being able to manage it previously. So and this is something where I think over time it's there's the world that I grew up in, you could choose to be Windows or Linux. And I was too old by the time Linux came out. It's like I've evolved. I don't use a command prompt. Whereas as I'm wearing a Powers Hell t-shirt, so this is something where it's if you sort of think of skills that a Windows admin from the 90s would not believe they would need, or that they wouldn't believe would be relevant for Windows management in 2023, things like having basic understanding of Bash, maybe having some Linux exposure, etc. The world has changed quite dramatically on this front. So, Aresh, are you ready?
Yeah.
So what I'm guessing is that whatever you've got on those slides is probably just summarized in these bullet points.
Yep. I'll quickly go through the important ones, and what I'm thinking is we can do the next month's session where I probably would ask for half an hour and I can go.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So the big ones are the Windows app. It's your it's a app that is for one-stop shop for everything, which was separate apps back in the day. So more details like Windows 365 had a different app, Azure Virtual Desktop had a different app, Microsoft DevBox had a different app, and RDP was a different app. Now with this Windows app, all these aspects are into a single unified app. You can have multiple accounts you can use to log in. However, you can't at this point in time pin resources from different accounts into your homepage. So that's the small caveat. But other than that, the app is fantastic, has dark mode as well. Love it. Yeah, I get it, Dean. Absolutely. That will be fantastic if that comes in as well. GPU support, massive announcements with that. 3 SKUs were announced for GPU, including NVIDIA and AMD. So it's not just NVIDIA-based GPU Windows 365 boxes. They're also AMD-based, and you can pick and choose. They're pretty decent size, like, plus, there was another SKU for just standalone Windows 365 announced, which had 16 CPUs as well and 64 GB. So quite memory intensive load can be taken care of. The AI-based capabilities that were discussed were mainly around the dashboarding and all. So essentially in the reporting feature for Windows 365, they've added AI. So now they tell you recommendations whether you are undersized, oversized, and gives you a nice table format with resources marked in red, orange, whether they are right size, and even based on latency. So that kind of, which I think they were individual reports back right now. Now they've taken those reports and done more intelligence by applying AI on top of it, and giving you more recommendations than just showing you what is undersized or what's not right size. Customer managed keys, that's part of the purview. So now not only the only option that existed was Microsoft managed keys, now you also have an option to bring in custom keys.
So a quick question on the custom managed keys. In my mind, I'd like to think that they're using Azure Disk Encryption under the covers for that. But then that also would lead me to think that you'd need to be using Win365 Enterprise, and you'd also need to have an Azure subscription for that stuff to work.
Yes.
Is that basically what the requirement there would be?
And probably purview as well. So I have a better screenshot for this because
and potentially keyboard.
Sorry?
And potentially keyboard.
Yeah. And and while you're pulling that up, the other one as well is like with customer lockbox. Normally, lockbox is like let's say like an Office 365 E5 and M365 E5 conversation. Is there that kind of requirement here, or is it just Win365 Enterprise is what would give you customer lockbox? Now that's
Yeah, that I don't think there was any emphasis on the license type, whether business or enterprise. However, the good part out here is that the lockbox feature is now extended into Windows 365. So if support wanted to work on your Windows 365 box, it will show up in your admin center, whether to approve or not approve the Microsoft person. And also it's a time-bound thing. So even if you approve it, that particular access to the Windows 365 desktop is temporary or hourly or whatever has been set. It's not going to be permanent for the Microsoft support guy to use it. So the encryption is part of the purview compliance. And in fact, there's something also around the data loss prevention. So purview had two things. data loss prevention, now you can apply those policies into your Windows 365. So people can be like, you can put policies, don't print this document, don't download this, or don't copy this document, and all those DLP policies can be applied through Purview into your Windows 365. Watermarking, screen capture already existed. In fact, I've written blogs probably 3 months back on those topics. So there's nothing much. Maybe the announcement is more around GA, nothing that this was not existing. And what else? Let me quickly see if I've missed. Yeah, big announcements around AVD. That is now Azure Stack HCI shows up within the portal while you're creating the host pools, which is very cool. That means people can use their own servers in their own data centers with Azure Stack HCI and deploy the session hosts on them. So all you're doing is you're just using all the control plane as a service from Microsoft on AVD, and all your servers and everything are running within your own Azure Stack HCI in your data center. So that's a neat feature that's coming. And anything else? Did I miss out anything else? We talked about GPU, Windows app, the 16 CPU. Oh yeah, and some partner announcements that the VMware, what do you call, app volumes and VMware protocol also was announced for Windows 365. So not only you can use natively VMware protocol, you could RDP, but you can also use Blast protocol for say. And from the Citrix house, there was announcements around machine creation. The statistics said were mind-boggling. They could provision 5,000 desktops in 15 minutes using machine creation services from Citrix within Windows 365 as well. So Citrix had a slight more extension as well. I think that pretty much sums up all the anything on the, yeah, and last, AVD personal desktop auto scaling. What it meant is essentially until now there was no option to save money on personal desktops created in Azure Virtual Desktop. Now the power policy also takes care of personal desktop. That means you can schedule a shutdown of the personal PC in off business hours. So let's say if a user is working 8 to 8 and you want to shut down and save money in Azure, because remember, Azure Virtual Desktop is everything powered on is bleed in terms of dollars. So you could put a power policy where after 8 o'clock in the night, that particular personal desktop, it was always a functionality in the pool, but never in the personal. Now it can shut down your personal desktop as well. So that summarizes it. I think in the next session, I can go through each feature in the screenshot. Of course, nothing is live for us to play with, but I can show you more detailed screenshots in the next session next month.
So we're seeing that we're already pretty much like we're only a week out from December now. What I'm thinking here is that we won't have a December meetup. Instead, we'll do it in January. So if you're okay for doing this in January, I'll sign you up for that now.
Sounds like a good plan. And by then we get access to all the toys as well.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That gives you a bit more lead time and maybe putting pressure on, even if it just means you're getting guest access to someone else's environment where this is live. If they're not quite ready to unleash everything, that might hopefully that's a way that you might be able to get some of this shown live.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's go back to the presentation. I don't think we've got. Actually, that's it. Sorry, one more thing. I just did the Steve Jobs, and one more thing. Apple, Mac OS support added to Universal Print. Now, there's one other thing, and that was not deliberate. That was maybe it was the ghost of Steve Jobs reaching out to me. Probably just one of the things that I want to highlight here. There's a couple of different things that are listed, but it's the final one that I didn't realize it happened until I looked at the universal print announcement from Ignite, where they said that they had recently brought Microsoft 365 Business Premium in line with E3 and E5 to get it from 5 print jobs per month up to 100 print jobs per month. But when you go and take a look at the licensing documentation for that, it still shows Business Premium as 5. Okay, so yes, okay, Steve answered that question.
Probably can repeat the question for the.
Yeah, so the question was, what is pull print? So that's effectively, walking up to the printer and using your swipe card or whatever to release your print jobs there.
Yeah, follow me print is the other conversation. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I tested with the QR code release stuff the other day, and it works pretty well. But and this thing will support cards. There's another way that you can use swipe cards for that RFIDs.
Well, that comes down to the printer universal print software, if it supports the card reader and everything associated. So yeah, the Mac OS support stuff for universal print looks pretty cool. What I'm guessing we don't have another slide after this. Last one.
Yeah, so this is the last slide. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to add something.
Yeah.
We should add in there. Is Mac OS Platform SSO got announced that it will be coming out shortly. And what that allows you to do is basically manage the user profile on the Mac OS. So they sign in with Entra ID account, and it's a local account, not an admin account. So basically this is where it's bringing it more in line with the Windows experience, where you have a standard access account instead of an admin account on there. So keep your eye out for that. It's anticipated it'll be out in the next couple of months. And that's been working directly with Apple. The other part that we've got in the Mac OS space is the settings catalog. Has pretty much every setting that Apple has published in their DDM, I think all. And that's all sitting there based on the Apple DDM declarative. I can't remember what the DDM stands for now, but basically it's all the declarative device management NEGA configurations where they detail it out in YAML, and then it gets fed into Intune so we can manage it. So it's pretty quickly updated and it's really cool under the hood. So Mac OS stuff, there's been a lot of really awesome announcements around, and it brings a lot of control into the Intune. So if you've looked at it previously, have another look at it because it's changing.
And I was being very focused when we were talking about Windows Autopatch.
Windows Autopatch, yes.
There's bigger ramifications academic. Because I'm guessing the number of academic tenants and the number of users on those would be incredibly large multiples of how many people have got business premium licenses.
More than likely, yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Yeah. There's more than the one conversation that. Oh yeah. There's a lot of a couple more moving pieces there at scale that I was not thinking about.
And I'm just going to let you keep thinking out loud on that one.
Yeah, that one. But if it happens, the positive there is that it's one less question you have to stop answering. I'm not sure. I don't know what the plans are for that. So there's a positive if it happens.
Sure, there is.
And you can tell people you're the one who pushed for it and made it happen. If it happens.
Sure.
Business premium, just a reminder, business premium is limited to cap at 300 per tenant. You cannot have more than 300 licenses in a business premium.
Correct.
So what does that give us? 30,000 print jobs per month.
Yeah.
That's print jobs are the new currency. It's not how many
Yeah, but
dollars
like,
per month. It's how many print
no,
jobs
no,
per
no, Mark, but they just posted the cost. I was discussing that with someone over the weekend. Every 10,000 jobs cost $90 a month. So it's way cheaper for you to pay for those 30,000 would be like $270 times 300 Microsoft Business Premium, unless you already own them for other reasons.
Yeah.
Like universal printing is like, I was discussing with someone in uni because the guy said, look, we have like this kind of stuff. And again, it's a print job. It's not a page, it's a print job. And a print job
Yeah,
might be composed of one job with 1,000 pages or 100 copies of 1,000 pages is still one job.
Yeah, and I think, and one of the other things as well here that I think was problematic was with, so let's say even with when they were, everything was listed at 5 print jobs included per month, regardless of the license. Even across a larger organization, just the sheer amount of pooling that would take place would probably mean that people are covered anyway. Whereas in a smaller org, it wouldn't take too much for one person to keep printing out revisions of the same page as separate print jobs to consume their allowance for the month. So yeah, so this 100 change is, basically going from 5 to 100 is a very welcome change there. And would definitely make it something that would be way more attractive to use, as opposed to something that they just don't even bother setting it up because they can't see how the 5 licenses would work for them, or the 5 jobs would work. So what I'll do here now is I'll just stop the recording, because this is where we switch over to general discussion, where we can sort of cover off anything that maybe you don't want your name associated with a question or comment that you make. Now, based on the things that we say prior to this session, you can kind of see that we're generally pretty open with this stuff. But let me just stop the recording in case there is anything that you just want to focus on that maybe it's a bit sensitive, and you just don't want there to be a record. So for anyone who's watching the recording, thank you and good.